In this episode, I enter the Welsh red light district, Alistair looks worried, and I stagger up a hill. This is Straight Line Mission Across Wales 2. So, just a quick recap on the trip so far. The mission had been going far better than I could ever have anticipated, and with Alistair's help I managed to cover 13 miles of the 41-mile route. Incidentally, I was on the verge of overtaking the 13.5 mile distance I'd achieved in Scotland, and to surpass this would be a major achievement. Alistair and I had just spent the last hour and a half ascending the face of a sheer 300 metre incline which had tested our resolve and drained our energy as well as our food and water supplies to almost zero. With fading light now an issue, Alistair and I had come up with a new plan. Instead of attempting to cover the remaining 2.5 miles to the forest at Camp C, I would instead do my best to cover just one more mile to a waypoint that was visible on both my GPS and Alistair's more basic phone tracking app, a small stream. Meanwhile, Alistair would need to return to his car to collect more supplies for us both, including our boil-in-the-bag adventure food dinners, more snacks, water, and now Lucozade for day 3, plus Alistair's slightly more substantial camping equipment. It would take at least 3 or 4 hours for Alistair to find a safe way down the mountain and back up again, meaning that he would be navigating most of the return leg in the dark. I would have to ensure I had reached the stream and got my tent set up properly in the meantime, but first, a further mile of trekking, and the weather was turning.
So guys, the plan is to find an emergency camp spot. That huge climb just took so long that Alistair and I have decided that we can't make it to Camp C, which is about 3 and a bit miles away, in the remaining hours of daylight. So we're going to have to set up camp on a relatively flat piece of ground, about 0.8 miles from here. So I'm thinking it should be doable. This is quite tough. I think this is probably the hardest bit of the mission so far. Very windy, raining a little bit. Yeah, it's very tough. That's all I'm going to say, really. Just got to keep going, keep your spirits up.
The first few hundred yards of this stretch was fairly tolerable, despite the ground being pretty uneven, although that's not particularly evident from the camera footage. Had Alistair been with me, we may well have agreed to set up camp there and then, and cut our losses in return for a decent amount of daylight to put up our tents and a relatively dry and flat piece of ground. However, with our plans to meet at the aforementioned stream set in stone, I would have to press on and cross my fingers that the terrain up ahead would be suitable for camping. The initial signs weren't particularly good, as I was starting to encounter some gnarly, uneven, knobbly and boggy patches. The one silver lining was that I just managed to pass my Scotland distance, but that was scant consolation. Alistair was also trying in vain to get back to his car, but was being hampered by waist-high bracken.
Just waist-deep bracken. I've just come off here, heading down to the road. It's just unbelievable. It's just so deep. Getting caught in it, basically.
These photos, taken by Alistair earlier in the day, actually give some indication of what Alistair was up against in order to reach his car. Meanwhile, my camera was starting to play up again, so my footage here is quite limited, sadly. Despite my cheerful demeanour in this next clip, I was totally exhausted, and the 1/4 mile stretch that I had to cover seemed like ages. The ground was looking pretty boggy, and that looked ominous.
Well, situations like this are extremely difficult. It reminds me a lot of Scotland when I was traipsing through the moors by myself. You just got to keep your pecker up. Just got to try and stay positive. It's very knobbly, undulating. Some of it's soft, some of it's got rocks underneath. And, sort of innocuous, but you know, any one of these little knoblets here could be ankle breaking, so it's just a lot to think about, even in such sort of, as I keep saying the word innocuous, but it seems like it, but it really isn't. Anyway, not long to go until the emergency camp point.
Despite the accidental deviation at the top of the big climb, I had been able to stick closely to the straight line route. No surprise perhaps, as the terrain had been fairly flat for the past half mile or so and there wasn't a farmer in sight, but I would have bigger fish to fry. Unfortunately, not long after that optimistic sounding clip was filmed, it began to get very dark very quickly, and almost simultaneously the rain arrived. It started off as a mild drizzle, but little by little the intensity increased, and before long I was caught in heavy rain. Then disaster struck. Just as my GPS alerted me that I was at the rendezvous point, the ground suddenly became very boggy indeed, and I ended up stumbling thigh deep into the exact stream where I'd agreed to meet Alistair. This wasn't your run-of-the-mill stream though. In fact, I had blundered right into a network of mini waterways, lethally hidden amongst spongy tufts of grass, reeds and gnarly terrain. I fell into these hidden death traps twice more, drenching myself fully up to the waist. I was now in a complete panic, desperately trying to escape this cursed area before the sunlight completely disappeared. I was in dire need of shelter from the elements and did my best to locate the biggest tuft of grass I could to set up my tent. Of course, the tent pegs wouldn't go into the ground properly and kept slipping out, plus I had to use my backpack to prop up one side of the tent, which wasn't resting on the tuft of grass at all. I managed to strip off out of my wet clothes and into my sleeping bag, and even managed to record this rather apocalyptic looking video.
Well, this is looking pretty bleak, guys. I've been waiting 3 hours in my tent, which is perched on some very, very boggy ground, starting to leak through, and Alistair's still trying to get up here on the way back from the car with supplies. I have to say, I'm a little bit worried, but nothing I can do at the moment. So this could be the last video of the trip.
After a couple of uncomfortable hours inside the tent, I tried to contact Alistair, but to no avail due to the sporadic phone signal in such a remote place. At least I was dry though, or was I? It was at this point that things got even worse. In my haste to put up the tent and clamber inside, I had not attached the rain cover roof properly, which was a weird hexagonal shape, very fiddly, and required extra pegs which I had used already to tie down the tent as much as possible. In the heavy rain, water was now seeping into the tent through the roof and gathering in a pool on one side. To make matters worse, water from the bog I was perched on was slowly seeping through the base of the tent, which had now also tilted at an angle thanks to the wind. My sleeping bag was now wet, and I was desperately trying to prevent myself and my dry clothes from slipping into the increasingly large pool of water inside my tent. Still, could be worse. Alistair wasn't exactly having a whale of a time either in the pitch black.
Well guys, it's come to this. Here I am in the middle of Wales on my own in the dark, trying to find Marcus. I've got him locked on the map, but I kind of knew this would happen after we split up. I was never going to get to him before the night fell. So I think I've got another half a mile of traversing using this app. I've got about 30 kilograms of gear in my rucksack, and it's not raining, so lots to be positive about, apart from the fact that I can't see anything.
The quote, "Lots to be positive about apart from the fact I can't see anything," is quite possibly the most brilliantly optimistic statement in a dire situation I've ever heard. Now you can see why Alistair was such an ideal teammate. In return for this optimism, Linnea, the goddess of straight line missions, now dealt us a slightly better hand. Firstly, as Alistair said, it stopped raining. Then, all of a sudden, Alistair wandered through a patch of ground with phone signal and received a text from me that I'd sent earlier confirming my rough location. Somehow, half an hour later, at about 9:30 p.m, Alistair miraculously stumbled across my tent. Heroically, he repaired my leaking roof, cooked me an evening meal, plied me with copious amounts of whiskey, sorted me out with a spare sleeping bag and jivvy bag, all while tending to his own well-being. Never before on a straight line mission had I witnessed such competence. Despite this, I did only get 2 hours sleep, and I was pretty knackered, but I was back from the brink.
Morning guys, this is day 3 of the Wales mission. As you can tell by my sort of general lethargic demeanour, we've had a pretty terrible night's sleep. I met up with Alistair around a mile after we had that awful hill that we had to climb up with, and we were thinking of going another 3 miles or so, but the weather started to close in, it got quite dark, so we set up camp about a mile or so after that point, but it was on such boggy terrain. I was stumbling, I fell in a sort of boggy river 3 times on the way to the camp, and it was just one of the most awful nights we've had. Alistair, would you agree with that, or is it?
Yeah. In terms of terrain that we've just camped on, Marcus's tent was pooling with water that was coming up from the bottom. It's just so boggy here. What he also didn't mention is 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours of me stumbling around in the dark looking for Marcus, because our waypoints were slightly out of whack, and then and obviously it was completely pitch black by the time I even left the car. So it got pretty dire. It was about I said about 9 p.m. after a couple of hours of searching. I said if I don't find him, I'm going to pitch up and hopefully find each other in the morning. But thankfully I managed to find him, and we got some food.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of a situation, same as what I had in Scotland, where I was just a little bit worried about where the other people were, this Alistair, because the worst thing you can do almost is to split up, but because there's only 2 of us, and Alistair's got to access his car for supplies and stuff like that for me and for him, there's only a certain amount of things that he can do with me at the moment. You have to split up at some point, so it's
I'm not going to recommend this to anyone else. I think it's slightly stupid.
It's quite dire at some points as well, isn't it? But
I think we're doing our best to mitigate the risk as we go along. Regular checking points and stuff. But,
okay.
Yeah.
Right. Well.
Furthest you've ever come on one of these missions.
Yes, I'm getting up to the Scotland line now. Fantastic. Right. See you later, guys.
Alistair would again have to head off in a separate direction back to his car in order to deposit all the excess weight and all the wet clothes and sleeping bags from the previous night. I would have to meet him in around 3 3/4 miles time on a picturesque road, and by picturesque I mean absolutely stunning. I was desperate to get there, although I'd still have quite a trek to do so.
So I'm sort of crossing quite a lot of mossy terrain. It wasn't too severe, but the problem is it's just quite undulating and quite difficult to find your footing. So it's one of those sort of ankle rolling kind of gradients and terrains. It's fine. I mean, there's no worries from farmers or anybody around. But I've got to make this long stretch really count, because I've got to try and make a lot of progress today. So I'm sort of on limited water, limited food at the moment. Just got to keep on going, keep my chin up, and that's all I can do. So gradually reaching the foot of this hill. Progress has been very slow through this sort of mossy terrain. Just so energy sapping, that's the problem. Like, oh my god, and I just then went into a bog. Oh god, it's just impossible to know what's got water under, what hasn't. So I'm constantly getting wet feet, even though they're much warmer now. It's still unpleasant. Right. Oh god, I always fear just walking into some like mini crevasse and getting stuck, but I'll try and get to the bottom of the hill.
I slowly progressed to the bottom of the hill up ahead, and despite good weather conditions I still had 3 problems. Firstly, the pain in my hip caused by slipping over at the end of day 1 had returned with a vengeance, and I was struggling to lift my left leg in particular. Secondly, the salmon and broccoli pasta adventure food pack I'd eaten for breakfast that morning wasn't sitting particularly well, and I was beginning to feel a bit nauseous. Thirdly, I was going at a snail's pace. As if the downhill and flat boggy sections weren't bad enough, I would now have to ascend a steep hill at the same time. I could barely move 10 yards without getting badly out of breath, not helped of course by my heavy backpack.
Oh, it's just grueling at the moment. I feel like I'm stopping every 20 yards just to catch my breath. I've still got to get up this. This is no mean feat. It's just this spongy stuff still, which is sapping my energy like nobody's business. Oh god, let's keep going.
Here we are then, my first peak of the day. I've just come from down the valley. I left Marcus about 40 minutes ago at the campsite. Progress is slow because of the heather and the bog. So probably another hour. I've got about 1,000 foot of descent now until I can find the road, and then walk about a mile up to the car. So it's going well. Marcus has got a 4-mile stretch now. I've then got a half an hour drive to try and meet him. Hopefully the weather stays like it is, which is cloudy but dry at the moment.
Alistair managed to capture a beautiful panorama too. I mean, just look at this awesome photo.
There he is, what a trooper. An absolute trooper.
Right, I've almost reached the summit of this stinking hill. You can see again how far we've climbed up. Oh, it's been awful. But an old friend, a fence. I've had plenty of practice climbing over these on day 1. So by this point, absolutely straightforward. I do say that with a hint of irony, of course. It's been nothing but straightforward this whole trip. So onwards. This is such an unexpected glory about walking on a path after so long in the wilderness. I think somewhere down there is Camp C, and a sort of uphill foresty section which I'm not really looking forward to, but we'll see. I'm just going to keep on going down there, give Alistair a ring just to make sure I'm okay and he's okay, and then we'll continue. Got to take the rough with the smooth.
It's normally good to be optimistic, but at this point it was almost wildly ludicrous. My positive demeanour disguised the fact I was struggling in every way. The main problem was that the horrendously boggy climb I'd finally managed to conquer had drained what little energy I had left. I'd used up all my Lucozade and almost my entire supply of water to help me power over that particular obstacle, and progress was painfully slow. I'd covered barely a mile in over 2 hours. But suddenly, Deus ex machina. As I was crossing that dirt track, a maintenance van passed by, and the kind driver gave me the rest of his water as he was clocking off for the day. I sounded pretty desperate, I've got to say.
Alright, have you got any water? Amazing. Are you lost? No, I'm where you headed, Bob? On expedition. That way. I don't know, it's just yeah, I'm the first person to cross Wales. Right. Yeah.
This guy had single-handedly given me a lifeline and enabled me to continue the mission for a bit longer at least. If anyone knows this bloke, just shake his hand for me. That was the good news. The bad news was that I was almost 3 miles away from Alistair on that beautiful mountain road. However, Alistair was getting a little bit concerned about my safety.
There's a frickin' helicopter in the middle of this valley. What's going on? Look. What is happening? What is happening? What's going on?
So I don't know if you guys saw that on camera, but I just bumped into a guy in a van, and he happened to have some water on him, so I've filled up my bottle, and I can't tell you how happy I am about that. I was running out of water and just really fearing the next couple of miles, but well, very grateful to the chap who was in the van. He's given me a real boost, so I better repay him with some proper hiking down this hill. Just ascending this mossy valley now. Tell you what, it's a hell of a lot easier coming down than it is coming up. I don't think you need me to tell you that. I sort of headed straight for this area of deforested wood, I suppose. Hoping that wasn't our planned camp point. Anyway, that would have been a bit disastrous.
You guessed it. The wood almost a mile up ahead was indeed Camp C. Maybe a slight upgrade on Camp B, the shooting wood though. Sorry I don't have any actual footage of this. I thought I'd taken plenty, but evidently my camera is having a bit more trouble than I'd thought. As I made it to the bottom of the hill, I passed the 15-mile point, but I was in for a rude shock. In the planning stage, we've been using satellite imagery as recent as 2020 to plot a straight line route. It does actually say 2022 on the screen, but I can assure the imagery was from 2020. This is a difficult task, as although the imagery does give a very useful overview of what we would have to overcome, it is impossible to know for sure what the terrain is going to be like without scouting the entire route in advance. This would be impractical, however, as one unforeseen issue would result in a whole new line having to be drawn. The alternative, as we had done, was simply to rely on the satellite imagery. This is the satellite imagery of the upcoming section of woodland taken in 2020, despite what it says. It looked like an ideal secluded camp spot and not too difficult to pass through, but nothing could have been further from the truth. In the 2 years since this imagery was captured, this whole section was now in various stages of deforestation. The downhill section after the road had been destroyed entirely, leaving behind sludge and all kinds of ex-woodland detritus. Quite sad, really. It took me the best part of 30 or 40 minutes to descend the valley of this treacherous bomb site of a place. Up ahead there were men operating logging machinery, dead on my straight line route. As I fought my way through more deforested terrain, right under the noses of the loggers in what was probably now a prohibited area, I started to feel uneasy. The area I was crossing was highly unsuitable for hiking, not least in an unstable environment with the peril of logging taking place around me. I did actually take some footage here, but unfortunately it didn't record properly. I did have a go at climbing up the heavily wooded bank that you can see in this rather pixelated clip. I got barely 50 yards into the wood in about half an hour, as I was constantly being impeded by all manner of obstacles, not least fallen trees and mini crevasses, unstable ground and a mass of unstable detritus blocking my path. In addition to this, I was completely exhausted, completely out of water and food, struggling with a hip injury and now completely broken psychologically. I tried reversing out of the wood and using the adjacent path, but soon realised I'd be deviating just outside the 50-metre leeway corridor and would thus lose my chance of a gold run. Absolutely gutting. Moreover, it had started to rain again and I began to start shivering. Humorously, at this exact moment, at 2:42 p.m, I managed to get some phone signal, and a flood of supportive messages from my WhatsApp support group who were following my progress on a tracking app began flooding through. Stuff like, "Oh, Marcus is making some progress now, nothing can stop him." The reality, of course, was entirely different. Such little progress was being made, deviation was not an option, and I was completely dead on my feet. I was conscious of the fact that continuing through the virtually impenetrable woodland was beyond my capability, especially given my physical condition and my large backpack that was impossible to manoeuvre through tight spaces. Still 1.5 miles from the next rendezvous point, and in a rare place with phone signal and a direct access road, at 2:45 p.m. on day 3, I sent the following message to Alistair and the rest of my WhatsApp group. Mission abandoned. Sometimes you just have to accept defeat and take it at face value. As a chess player, I know all too well what it's like to suffer a humiliating and embarrassing defeat. But this mission was neither humiliating nor embarrassing. In fact, I was proud of what I'd achieved, giving a far better account of myself than on the previous Wales mission, covering 10 times the distance compared with my inaugural attempt. I think the main mistake we made was trying to be a bit too ambitious on day 2. In hindsight, it would have been more sensible to set up camp earlier than we did, or at least manage our food supplies more accurately. A bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, as they say. My impression is that problems tend to snowball. Once one thing goes wrong, this invariably leads to more serious issues. Ultimately, I don't regret my decision to stop. Unlike in Scotland, I prioritise safety instead of feeling the need to prove something to the world all the time, which is a definite character flaw of mine. I knew that I couldn't continue, both due to the physical exhaustion and impassable terrain, but despite feeling really gutted after such a promising start, I knew I'd given it my best shot. I hope everyone who has followed these missions since my first disaster can see the progress that has been made. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Huge respect also must go to Alistair, who was pretty much flawless throughout the entire trip and was just the kind of comrade I needed on such a grueling adventure. I managed to catch up with him on Zoom a couple of months later. Well, Alistair's here. Hello, Alistair. How are you doing?
Hi, Marcus. Yeah, I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, fantastic. Well, just a bit under the weather, but all good, thanks. It's been almost 2 months, I think maybe even more than 2 months since we've had the expedition. And so looking back, how do you feel about the whole thing? Was it enjoyable or traumatic?
That was brilliant. Yeah, great adventure and definitely something I would be up for doing again. I would definitely do it again in the future. Yeah, it's great. I mean, any excuse to get outside and just sort of do something that pushes yourself is worthwhile. So definitely worth it. Yeah, really good.
Yeah. What was it like for you in a support role in terms of logistically? I'd imagine you have to be kind of quite on the ball, right?
Yeah, there was a lot of sort of making sure that I kind of knew where you were, wasn't there, and just sort of so we could coordinate our meetups. It was actually quite an interesting dynamic in terms of being able to just hop off when needed. Sometimes easier than if it was close to the road. It was fairly easy just to sort of, drive around Wales a little bit and find some shops for supplies, or we need a bit of duct tape or whatever it was. So in that sense, it was sort of handy extra, and it meant that you could make up for a lack of preparation in some areas. Like, we didn't quite have enough food or drink. Okay, we can just go sort that out, in some places, obviously, until it got to the really mountainous section. But I mean, better to be prepared for anyway. It just depends. Not everyone's going to have a support crew, are they, if they try to do this sort of thing? Support crew.
Support team, yeah.
It certainly makes the whole thing a lot more adaptable on the go, I think. But I mean, I enjoyed it, of course, yeah.
That's awesome to hear. I mean, do you think, I'd imagine there were points on the trip where you felt like this is really going well. What was the highest point of the trip for you? Not in terms of terrain, but in terms of like your emotionally.
Yeah, I personally quite enjoyed the bit where we climbed up the massive sort of sheer kind of cliffy bit, because that was the first time I really got to kind of properly do like something that was difficult for me as well. Something that was quite kind of like, oh, this is actually epic. Like, it was an achievement in itself just to get up there as long as it took, and to get both of us up there with all the gear and everything, especially your rucksack and things. So I felt like that was really fun. Yeah, and I enjoyed kind of finding the path, up there. That was great. Yeah,
we somehow managed to stay within about 10 or 12 meters of the line when we were ascending it, but then all of a sudden at the top of the hill we were celebrating almost, and we just sort of forgot, deviated. But no, it was that was challenging, but I think I kind of agree with you. That was probably the most epic part of the trip.
So good.
Yeah. So on day 3, obviously we had to abandon the mission around about just before 3:00 on that day. You got the text from me, I think, around about that time. And what were your emotions at that point?
Well, I was more confused really because the area that I was in had such crap signal that the texts were coming like really kind of randomly. So I think I got some other text post sort of, oh, it's over, and then some other texts afterwards that, oh, well, I'm gonna go to this point and stuff. So I was more just like, oh, just my whole sort of thought the whole trip really was how can I help and how can I assist as much as possible. So I just thought, oh well, you know, I can see a route to where you are. I'll just come to you with all my stuff, food, drink, the car, whatever, walk if I need to, and just try and assist as much as possible. I didn't really think, oh, it's definitely off or it's definitely on. Like, you know, it's very easy to, you know, everyone has super low moments and high moments on these sort of things. You know, like when you're doing stuff that can be considered type 2 fun at times, the kind of fun which is more in recollection than in the moment. So I think that was my only thought was really like, oh, how can I get to you and just assist, and then we'll just see what the situation is really. You know, is it a low moment? Is it really actually this is impossible? And you know, and then I think so. I didn't really overthink it too much, but then obviously when I got to you, and then it was like, oh, you know, actually this isn't going ahead anymore. I think there was a real kind of sense of like, I was like, oh, I'm very disappointed. I think, and I think I probably felt a little bit responsible as well, thinking maybe there's something I could have done. Maybe I could have given you more, or taken that extra moment to find some more food or something like that. Or I don't know. It's always hard to know. It's always easy to look back and go, oh, could have done this or could have done that. But I think considering the situation, it was probably right.
I think
the right time.
Yeah, in retrospect, I think we did pretty well overall. I mean, it was a much better attempt than either of the other ones that I've done, I think, and that was mostly thanks to you, Alistair, because you obviously supported me, especially I think on the end of day 2 when things went kind of pear shaped, and then all of a sudden you were there, like a shining knight in armor. Well,
that video of that bit would have been seen, right? My riding saying people who are watching this now will have seen that.
Well, part. Yes, I've included the nighttime disaster.
That was you were in a sorry state when I found you. Let's put it that way. I mean, what you know, the water pouring in and the sort of half-built tent and the cold and no food and boggiest, pitch black, raining. It was quite something. That was quite something. That was like I mean, I was so elated at that point to find you. It was just that was amazing. So
yeah, it was always quite surprising, wasn't it? Because I just didn't think you would anyway find me. It was only, I think, due to a rogue text that you got at some point, and then
I found one tiny patch of signal somewhere, and it just happened to be just sort of lead me to you. It was fairly miraculous. I really did. I thought half an hour more and we'll be camping separately in the middle of where you've got nothing. Well, I didn't know what your situation would be, but having found you, it was clear that would have been a pretty torrid night, to say the least. So,
yeah, no, absolutely. Good. I think it was anyway, but I think you made it a lot more tolerable for me. So
what an adventure.
Yeah, it was just a shame that obviously it went pear-shaped on day 3 as well. Just the terrain, often looking at the satellite imagery, the terrain that we anticipated for days 2 and 3 actually looked okay, but when it came down to it, it was so boggy and just so uneven. I was constantly stumbling or something and just getting stuck, and it was hell on earth really for that day 3, and I just ran out. Yeah,
you're very well to even get that far, I think, on your own. So, all the credit to you, really.
Well, it's a team effort, isn't it? So, I mean, in terms of future missions and that kind of thing, would you recommend to the viewers, that they should give it a go? And if so, what would they need to be able to do to succeed?
I think everyone should consider doing outdoor adventures, and anything could be an adventure if it pushes you. And if we're specifically talking straight line missions, I think I'd probably just recommend you don't try it on your own even if you've got experience, actually, because I think experience there's experience and then there's experience, and I think it's not just experience in walking through, bashing through bushes. I think anyone can bash through a hedgerow with enough sort of grit anyone can sort of, drive themselves to Wales and start walking across mountains. But I think you just need to be prepared. I think if this, watching your old videos before we'd even started chatting, and maybe comparing them to someone like GeoWizard, you just think, oh well, the reason maybe GeoWizard got further at that point was because he had things in place in terms of preparation and things like this. And I think if we're talking about Scotland, for instance, that's a great case of just like that. There's nothing, doable, but not with a shitty £10 tent, or not without your clothes being in dry bags, and not without the amount of food and water, so I just think, just be prepared. It just sounds so simple, but like actually just do crap loads of research, find people that are actually have some experience. If you have never been on an outdoor adventure, find someone who's got a bit more experience than you, and then maybe start doing some small stuff, maybe just a day mission first, and then just see, do you even enjoy this? I think that's the only thing I'd say about it, is just be wise, because you don't want to be that person that has to call mountain rescue if you even know how to do that, because you've been unprepared, and then that means that they're more stretched than they would have been. So that sounds really like a naysaying thing. I'm actually saying people should do it, but they should also just be intelligent about it. And if you're intelligent about it, then you'll have the right gear, and you'll have more likely to have fun and actually complete it. And most people want to complete it, don't they?
Well, I think it is partly that, isn't it? Obviously, the aim is to complete it, but it's almost as if giving it a go is almost equally good, because you could add into the countryside anyway. So there's a lot of things to be said for it, even if it doesn't go to plan.
Hang on.
And then the connection issue started. Bloody typical.
Failing looks like falling down a crevasse and breaking your
Alistair, I think your internet's gone. Hello? Is that
we're back.
Yeah. Hello again. Okay. One more question then. Who is going to be the next person to complete? Well, who's going to be the first person to complete Wales?
Well, I mean, still basing it off. No, I think it's probably going to be GeoWizard, most likely. I mean, he seems sort of keen. If he's keen, and I think there's been like three things that have kind of been like really rare to happen on one of these trips, like in his adventures. Like really kind of like you could never hope for those, and it's nothing to do with like experience. So I think probably him, if he puts his mind to it and actually tries it again, or wants to try again. Again, I don't think it matters. I don't think if there's people out there right now planning a trip to Wales, and tomorrow, to do the straight line mission, and tomorrow GeoWizard posts a video of him completing, straight line mission Wales, then go and do it anyway. Like, go and have an adventure and experience. And I think that's probably what he'd say as well. Yeah, maybe he's keen to be the first person and stuff. But good on him if he does it. I think that's obviously a goal of his, so great. I just think get outside, go do it, have fun.
I think we're all cheering GeoWizard on, aren't we? And I think he'll be good for him to be the first. He's the one that's inspired a lot of people to get outdoors and push themselves and try something a bit different. He deserves all the credit.
Maybe someone like in history has accidentally walked the whole way across Wales before in a straight line without realizing it, or within 50 meters.
It's possible. Who knows? It's one of those challenges. It sort of feels like it's doable, but it's almost like just out of reach. And I think really, I'd be surprised if anyone apart from GeoWizard could do it. I think it's one of those challenges, to be quite honest.
But we're still encouraging people to try.
Of course, we want to stuff. Yeah, increase the pool of enthusiasts.
Yeah, we don't need to leave disclaimers because it wasn't our idea as well.
Yeah,
it's GeoWizard. So if you break your leg, fall off a cliff, whatever. Like just GeoWizard invented it.
Yeah, that was his doing.
Yeah, reckless.
All right. Well,
Good.
thank you very much, Alistair. It's been great to talk to you. And obviously, if anyone in the comment section wants to write a few questions, we'll be happy to answer them. And in the meantime, Happy New Year.
Are we also saying that we're available for hire as pack mules? If people
Yeah. Don't know what our payment packages might be, but yes, anyone who wants to get in touch with us about potential straight line missions, do message.
Perfect. Lovely. Right. Cheers, Marcus. Good to speak to you.
Okay. Cheers, Alistair.
All right.
Of course, not even the Zoom call could be bereft of problems. But anyway, I hope that's given you some food for thought. Thank you very much to everyone who has followed my progress, and sorry I couldn't complete more than 38% of the mission, but 15.6 miles ain't bad for a novice adventurer like me. Finally, I kindly ask viewers to consider subscribing to my channel, or indeed liking or commenting on any of my videos. I'll be working on new content sometime soon, whenever I get a chance when I'm not teaching chess in schools. But so long for now.